This is a very, very singular honor for me. It's an honor, frankly, because I'm the one of the five that is here, not for himself, but because you couldn't have NYU standing here. I look at Henry, who shares with me a Jesuit education and who is self-evidently a model global citizen. Walter, coming from the nation that almost defines what it means to be a global citizen, and more importantly, the nation from which Albert Gallatin, NYU's founder, came, born 250 years ago last year. Peter, who creates the heart and soul of the city that I believe, notwithstanding the other great cities in the world, is the center of the world. And then to be honored in the same set with a person I will say is not just a friend, but an intimate friend, a person who is my hero, a person I love dearly, a person who I've known for now over 3 decades, Joel Klein, who is a public servant who inspires everyone. And then to have Rita and Gus, both of whom I claim for NYU Law School, because notwithstanding their other great affiliations, they're both graduates of NYU Law School, but who more importantly encouraged a neophyte, a person who, was born on the streets of Brooklyn and couldn't imagine getting any place that he couldn't drive, encouraged him to think about a world, global civil society. This is a great honor. I want to offer just a few reflections that I think, in a way, tie together the evening, using in part NYU as an exemplar, but I think you'll see a perfect congruence with what you've heard before and with the extraordinary agenda of this important organization we celebrate tonight, FPA. If I have a strength that I bring, it's not the kind of creativity or intelligence or vision that Rita described. I think what I am is this. So I'm a good noticer. I usually can notice things before other people do. Sometimes I notice what they're doing before they realize they're doing it. And then I'm a good storyteller. My son says, Dad experiences the world as 10% better than it is, and he articulates his experience as 15% better than that. Turns out this is a great quality in a dean or a university president, because you should be a little bit aspirational in your stories. But when I look out at the world today, I look at it very much through the lens of a Jesuit education, through a PhD, and a PhD, importantly, in religion at a pivot point for my church, the Catholic Church, when a great student of globalization, John the 23rd, was teaching the church that you were far better off if you looked at the world not through the single window you're given, but through the many facets of a diamond, and that we could learn more about our own faith by studying other faiths. This is certainly something I've lived since my entire family, including my wife, my children, my grandchildren, are all Jewish. My Irish Catholic brother-in-law says, not since Abraham of Ur has a Gentile begat as many Jews as John. But when I look out at the world, the first thought that occurs to me is that it looks an awful lot in one way like Renaissance Italy, when the creative class, the talent class, the leaders of society circulated among Milan and Venice and Florence and Rome. You change those nouns now to Shanghai and Abu Dhabi and London and New York, and you begin to see the same phenomena going on. And for some people, that means that there are a lot of people they don't understand that are circulating around them. And that's particularly true of Americans. Only 15% of our people have passports. Only 30% of our representatives in Congress have passports. And at the same time that that's happening, I see another phenomenon, which is a kind of miniaturization of the world. Think about this. So just at the time when this great fluidity is occurring, the world is miniaturizing. And gating strategies, we've just discovered that you can't gate out economies. We in universities have known always you can't gate out ideas. Now we're beginning to realize you can't gate out people. Gating strategies just don't work in this century that we've entered a decade ago. And the world is miniaturizing. In a way, New York is the first experiment in that miniaturization, if you think about it. It's the first city in the world that can say that every country in the world is represented in its public school system by kids that were born in that country. And if you go to the neighborhoods of New York, if you go out into the boroughs, you can hear the music, the prayers, taste the food of every country in the world. It really is the first experiment about how are we going to react to this fluidity and this miniaturization. Are we going to react to it with fear? Are we going to see a clash of civilizations? Are we going to kind of shut down and try to build gates that can't succeed? Or are we going to react to it as a great opportunity, the way John the 23rd taught me to react, the way my mentor, who when I encountered him, my PhD mentor, when I encountered him in 1963, was the world's leading expert on a medieval theologian of the Christian church, St. Anselm. But by 1983, 20 years later, I was at the United Nations celebrating the publication of his 60-volume work on world spirituality, which had 25 faith traditions in it. Now, that's the kind of migration humankind, I would submit, has to make. And universities have always been on the side of ecumenism. We've always been the great vehicles, as FPA is a great vehicle, of understanding, of the proposition that knowledge means something. So, you don't have to be a visionary or innovative. If in May of 2001, Rita Hauser, true story, calls you in and says, you've been dean of this law school for 12 years. Enough, get out of here. Okay, for the sake of this place, just get out of here. And go do what they've been asking you to do. Go take on the presidency. Now you have to understand at NYU Law School, everybody sees a move from being dean of the law school to being president as at best a lateral move. And so it's May 2001, so it's before 9/11. And you look out at this city, and you're in a university that was founded by Albert Gallatin, in his words, to be, quote, in and of the city, close quote. Unlike the universities of their time, the great universities of England or the United States that were out in the country. The northern boundary of New York City in 1831, when NYU was founded, was the north of Washington Square Park. Those red row houses there were the summer homes of the wealthy from downtown. Columbia was way out in the country. The Ivies were way out in the country. Oxford, Cambridge, way out in the country. And Gallatin said, let's create a university that's in and of the city. So you look out of the window, and you're the president now of a university that doesn't have a blade of grass, doesn't have a single gate. Most of its buildings aren't next to NYU. You have no choice but to say, wait a minute, we're ecosystematic with this city. We're in and of this city. And if you're in and of New York, you're attracting kids and professors and administrators that enjoy complexity and cacophony. They see that as a learning opportunity. They're not intimidated by it. They're ecumenists. They don't know they're ecumenists yet, but they're ecumenists. So it becomes natural then to get them out into the neighborhoods of New York. That's phase one. Get them out into the neighborhoods. Run buses every Saturday, every Sunday. Come, you want to get on a bus, you go out, there's an old timer in a restaurant, he'll tell you the story about the old country, you'll eat the food, you'll hear some music. You're using the asset that's there. You don't have a big monetary endowment, you use your locational endowment. And then you find out that's catching on. So what's the next step? Well, you start creating study-away campuses. But you want them not to be places for academic tourism. You want them to be high-quality places. So you say to your faculty, we want you to teach. We want these to be NYU courses. We'll set up. We'll create campuses. And And you're lucky because your French department had started in France 40 years earlier, and your Spanish department had started in Madrid. So you persuade them to take students that are from other departments, and then you're given a 55-acre estate in the city of Florence. In the city, not outside. It's the only villa inside the city, 1 mile from the Duomo. And you start building on this, and kids start, and professors start, and everybody's getting excited about this. So phase 2, you create these study-away sites. You create these study-away sites. Now, 16 of them, as Rita said, on 6 continents, with the 2 that will open up this fall. Our first in Australia, in Sydney, and our first, other than New York, in the United States, in Washington, D.C. Because why shouldn't you do study-away in Washington, D.C. if you're coming in from outside the United States? And that's what happened with phase 3. Because the only doorway in was New York. But then we opened up a doorway in Abu Dhabi and a doorway in Shanghai. So now, if you're a kid in the Bronx and you want to go to NYU, you have to decide first which doorway do you want to enter. Do you want to enter New York or Abu Dhabi or Shanghai? And when you enter a doorway, it means you're probably going to spend 5 of your 8 undergraduate semesters, or if you're a graduate student, most of your graduate students, in that place. But if you're an undergraduate and you're in New York or Abu Dhabi or Shanghai, you're being taught by NYU faculty, and it's NYU courses, and it's all seamless. And it moves, and that guarantees its quality. And you have all the services of the university. You have internships and all of that goes with it. And you can get as far out of your comfort zone as you want. So if you're in Paris, you can take the NYU Anglophone program or the NYU Francophone program, where everything's in French, including your calculus course. Or you can study at the Sorbonne, or you can study at Sciences Po, or you can combine the 4. You can live in our dorm, or you can live in a family with which we have a relationship that goes year after year, or you can go out in the market and rent it. It depends on how far you want to get out. You can have an internship with an American company or with a French company, or with a company from the Emirates. And that's the theme of this. So now you sit down to prepare for your next semester at NYU, no matter which doorway you've entered, you have to decide what continent do you want to study on. And it is not a branch campus system. It is not a hub and spoke system. It's a new form of university. We call it an organic circulatory system. And it turns out, and this is where I'll close my description of NYU, it turns out this is an extraordinary magnet for talent. So we just recruited an outstanding Chinese-American mathematician, out-recruited 3 of the brand name mathematics departments in the country that were offering that mathematician 50% more as a startup. But we were the only university that could say, if you come here, we'll promise you that 1 year out of 4 you can teach in Shanghai and your children can learn their patrimony and you can be near your parents. It turns out that if you'd said to Leonardo, you can only paint in this town if you paint only in this town, you wouldn't have gotten his paintings. And it turns out that that's a pretty good human resources notion. And it turns out, when you think about it, that universities always have been circulatory systems that operated beyond sovereignty. It's where Bologna began, and the great universities since have existed. And the greatest proof of proposition, which learn about it, because this gets me back to FPA. You want to feel good about this agenda, this organization? Come visit us on one of the 4 weekends when we're doing admissions for NYU Abu Dhabi. NYU Abu Dhabi, now the most selective school in the world. This year, 15,000 applications for 150 spots in the class. We have 450 students there, 450 students, 89 countries represented. The median student speaks 4 languages. A third of them had perfect SAT scores. 8 of them turned down Harvard to come to us next September. Oxford, Cambridge, Baydar, they're turning it down. Why? Because they get the vision of the world that's represented in the only student body in the world that doesn't have a center of gravity except the commitment to ecumenism, at the only university that allows them to circulate. So it turns out that you walk into these kids and they're unbelievably inspiring. And that's the hope. That's the hope that this organization represents. It's what draws people of the talent of Noel here. It's what draws those of you that are supporters of it and directors of it here tonight. And that's why its work is important, because we're at this moment where we're either going to accept the fact that the world is a jagged world and we're going to try to gate the ungateable away, or we're going to see the great chance to step forward and bring humankind through a critical threshold to a new plateau. I applaud FPA. I applaud Noel. I'm deeply, deeply grateful for the honor you bestowed, not upon me tonight, but upon the university about which I get to tell stories. Thank you all very, very much.